Hi, everyone. My name is Derek. I'm the CEO and founder of Wenwyn. And in this episode, we're going to talk about cities and what makes every city different and why that difference matters, really matters to city identity, to place marketing, to the kinds of ways that you communicate in the city and how outsiders can become insiders. Well, to begin, we have to ask the question, what in the world is a city? Like, what compromises a city? Is it a group of people? And the answer is, well, yeah, it is a group of people. The cities, it's not about the structure of it. It's not about the organization of it. Cities at their heart is people, and it's people who decide to group. Now, how do they decide to group? Why do they decide to group? And the answer to that is, well, it depends. Some group because it was along a transportation line and there was a commerce that sprung up, a hotel that eventually then grew into a business cluster, and then you have families and schools and hospitals and all that sort of thing. Some start because people go as a group and they want to live there. They want to establish a community for living. Cities get started for all kinds of reasons. Right now, there are cities that are being built around the world by corporations. And corporations have decided to make them self-sustainable and livable, but literally a place where you live, work, and play on an island, and you don't really get off that island because everything is self-contained. Then, of course, that begs a question, and that is, if companies are governed by values and there's a discrepancy sometimes between what they say is a value and what actually is a value, what does that mean when companies start cities? And so if cities are people and people group for all kinds of reasons, the question is, what helps a city to thrive? Why does that city grow? And the answer is because more people come in who resonate with those values. Have you ever felt like you were a black sheep in your own city? And so you moved somewhere else and you went, oh, I found my tribe. I found my place. Now, why is that? Is it better roads? Well, not necessarily. You can live in a place with poor infrastructure and yet resonate with the city that you're in. And the reason for that is shared values. Shared values. We value the same thing. And there's a difference between values that you don't acknowledge and values that you purpose for. The truth is, every grouping everywhere has some similar values. Let me just give an example on a very basic level when you think about families, okay? So every family has its own culture, has its own ethos, and every family shares certain values, whether they admit to that or not. And let me just give you a brief example of how, even in my own family context, things were a little bit different and how I first really kind of discovered the differences. The home that I grew up in, my sister and I and my parents, whenever we sat down for an evening meal, it was like game on, party on. My mom managed to not just set a meal, but that gathering at the table was the place where we would talk about anything and everything. It's the place where we laughed and cried. It's the place where we sang songs. It's the place where we joked around. That dinner table for our family culture very much meant that nothing was off limits. There were no topics that were off limits, but we were all courteous in the way that we behaved toward one another, and we knew the conversations were going to be wide-reaching, and you were probably going to smile at some point during that evening meal. Well, I remember visiting another house, and I remember in that house just kind of asking, okay, what's it like at your house? And they said, oh, we're super friendly, it's super easy. And so we were used to literally talking about anything at the dinner table. And when we got to that house, I quickly discovered that there were some topics that were absolutely off limits. In fact, at one point they were like, oh, we love to sing. And someone suggested a song title. And I think I even started to hum that song. And I got looks like, we don't do that here. We don't hum a song. This is not a place for singing. This is not what we talk about here. So how did I bump up against those values? Well, they probably didn't even know that they had them. Their self-perception was one thing, but their actual values were another. And they very much let you know who belonged and who didn't, depending on kind of the non-verbal or non-direct, the indirect communication that was coming your way. So it didn't necessarily have to be spoken, but you for sure knew if you were on the outside or the inside. And I think everybody has experienced that. We experienced that on playgrounds. We experienced that in schools. You say something, you realize that you overstepped or you did something wrong for that particular group. And you know that that might be acceptable in a different group, in a different area. And the same thing's true with families. Well, as it turns out, the same thing is true with cities. Now, think about the city that you grew up in. You got it in your mind? Whatever city that is. Now I want you to think about the next city over. It doesn't really matter in which direction. Just think about the next kind of biggest city next to your city. Now here's my question. Were they the same? Would anyone confuse them? Probably not. Now, why? Now that's a little harder to articulate, isn't it? I mean, they both have hospitals, they both have school systems, they both have grocery stores, they both have restaurants probably. They both probably have some sort of a streets and street light system. But why are they so different? And the answer to that is actually pretty complex. But if you can know the difference, now you are ahead of the game. You can be perceived as an insider even as you're an outsider. Why? Well, because as Mike Myers once said, you're sprechen nie the same lingene. You're speaking kind of the same language as the place that you're in. And whenever you attract people to your city or you invite people into your city or your space, really you do so because you want to share the love that you have of your place and your community and your city. And it can be confusing sometimes, especially in place marketing and city marketing, where they feel like, okay, people are coming in, but then they leave after 3 or 5 years. And people start to wonder, well, why is that? Is it commerce related? Is it education related? And most of the time, the answers to those things are no, it's neither one of those. It's a values question. They ran into some invisible values that let them know they either belonged or they didn't belong. So knowing values really allows you to communicate. It allows you to resonate. It allows you to meet people where they are and then be heard in a way that matters to not only your everyday life, but to your professional life or to your business. Now, this is huge if you think about how cities compete with one another. So often they compete on the same things. We have a park, we have an amusement park, we have nice school systems, we have good businesses that we attract here. Fill in the blank. It kind of all blurs into each other. And occasionally you'll get someone who goes, we have the biggest ball of yarn or the biggest bottle of ketchup or whatever it is. And those are nice and interesting. But is that really enough to differentiate? And the answer really is no. In fact, even if you don't purpose your differentiation, the truth is other people are doing it for you. They're describing your city in certain terms. Right? New York City is described as if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. It's tribal, it's competitive. And people get upset because they think, well, the direct communicators, they're all so rude, but they're not being rude. In fact, in New York, they'll let you come in, but you're gonna have to compete once you're in. They're being direct so that you know where you stand. And you know that it's a dog-eat-dog kind of a world. It's competitive and they like that competition. If you go to LA, they love everything that's avant-garde. In fact, it's rare to meet someone from LA who doesn't think that they had the idea first. They all think they had the idea first. So they're not coming up with an idea and saying, who else had this idea? They're like, I came up with this idea. This is totally unique and original, whether it is or not. Why? Because they're used to experimenting. They're used to being the innovators. They're used to being a little avant-garde when it comes to their approach. So it's important to know the values of the city that you're going to. It's important to see that values come with grouping, that there are shared values. And the more you can purpose those values, and those values can both reflect who you actually are and who you long to be, the more powerful the momentum that you'll gain in your city, the more powerful the momentum of getting the kind of people that you want coming to your city or to your group or to your organization. But also, it allows you to know what you're aspiring to. So let's work off of this premise. No two cities in the world are the same. And nearly every city in the world is pretty great, depending on how you look at it and what they're trying to do. There's a reason why some people will stay in dying cities. So it's clearly not just about what other opportunities are out there. And it's clear that some people, even if they move, their heart is back with their other city and they're constantly going back to that city. So cities, groups, values, it really does matter to the way that we celebrate each other well. And if you can know the values, well, outsiders can become insiders. And you can actually begin to implement the change that you're looking for.